lied to him.
I know, but what you're considering a lie and what I consider a lie might be two different things. I'm from America. My culture is different than yours.
Baby, lie is lie.
Are you or were you a lesbian? Do you practice lesbianism?
I'm so guilt-ridden because I love this man. And I just want to be open and honest and get this over with and see if he'll take me for who I am. But it's getting harder and
Her
harder.
face goes blank before her mind even catches up. The kind of freeze that happens when a moment turns dangerous without warning. When a question lands and you realize it was never just a question. It was a test, a trap, and a judgment all wrapped into one. And in that second, you can almost see Lisa calculating what version of herself is safest to show, which truth is too heavy, and which lie might still survive the room. This was not a calm cultural exchange. This was an emotional ambush dressed up as tradition. And the air shifts so fast, you can almost hear the silence tighten. Before we go any further, I am Sabrina and you are watching TLC Drama Live. And if you stay with me here, you are going to see how one single question can expose an entire relationship. So subscribe, stay locked in, and drop your thoughts in the comments because this moment splits opinions like. Nothing else in this story. Lisa walked in expecting a formality, something symbolic, something polite, something she could pass through by smiling and following instructions. But instead, she walks straight into a room where her identity is being weighed, judged, and quietly sentenced. And the worst part is, she does not even know the rules of the game she is playing. Daniel sits beside her, calm on the surface, yet holding information he chose not to give her, which already tilts the balance before she ever opens her mouth. Because when one person knows what is coming and the other does not, that is not partnership, that is power. The question about her sexuality does not arrive gently. It lands with weight, and suddenly this is no longer about marriage, or culture, or tradition. It becomes about whether Lisa is acceptable as a person in this space, whether her past disqualifies her, and whether honesty will cost her everything. Her expression tells the whole story. Shock mixed with fear, fear mixed with calculation, calculation mixed with guilt, because she knows she is standing on years of silence, half-truths, and survival decisions that were never meant to be explained in one sentence. This is where secrets stop being private and start becoming weapons, where shame stops being internal and becomes public, and where tradition stops being guidance and turns into a courtroom. Daniel does not move to protect her. He does not prepare her. He does not soften the moment. And you start to feel how alone she is, even while sitting next to the man who claims to love her. And right here, ask yourself, if the truth is supposed to set someone free, why does it feel like it is about to destroy everything instead? She thought the hard part would be the ceremony, the uncle, the kneeling, the questions, but the setup was already rigged before they left the house. That morning, the way Daniel smiled while dressing her in traditional clothes wasn't warmth, it was surveillance disguised as affection. He adjusted her outfit like she was a prop, not a partner. Each fold of fabric felt like a reminder. This is what you wear. This is how you behave. This is who you're allowed to be today. Lisa laughed nervously, trying to match his energy, but her hands fumbled with pieces she'd only been shown once, and no one offered a mirror. What was framed as help was actually a silent test. He said he'd show her how to wear the headpiece, but his tone sharpened every time she needed a second try. Like every misstep confirmed something he already believed about her. That she wasn't ready. That she couldn't belong. That her role was to obey and make it easy for him. Every correction came with a small look. Not quite anger, but close. Disappointment laced with expectation. She wasn't being taught, she was being warned. And under that, something colder. If she embarrassed him, it would be her fault. He asked her to kneel at the right moment, to pass the wine at the right second, to move, speak, and perform exactly as he said. But the more instructions he gave, the less supported she felt, because support without empathy is still control. You start to see how pretend closeness works. It's not intimacy, it's choreography. And Daniel already knew the whole show. He just didn't give her the script. And if a man already knows you're going to fail but keeps pushing you toward the stage anyway, ask yourself, what is he really waiting to watch? He told her exactly how the blessing ceremony would go, down to every step, every nod, every glance she was supposed to give. But the more he explained, the less it felt like guidance and more like programming. Like he wasn't preparing her for something sacred he was setting the stage for. Something she'd be blamed for later. He told her she needed to kneel when they entered. He told her she had to hand him the wine, not directly to his uncle. He told her to speak only when asked, and not too much, because respect matters here. But then walked through those same rules like they were optional for him and mandatory for her. It wasn't teaching. It was a performance. And only she had consequences if she got the timing wrong. Lisa kept asking questions, trying to understand what was expected, but every answer was clipped, vague, like he wanted her confused but compliant. He kept saying, "Don't worry, it's fine. Everything will go well as long as you just tell the truth." And that line, "just tell the truth," hung in the air like bait. Because he already knew the truth might not land well. He knew what questions were coming. He knew what his uncle had already been told. He just didn't think she deserved to know any of it. It's the kind of double bind that makes a person lose their footing. No room to prepare, no right to complain, but full responsibility if things go sideways. This wasn't protection. It was plausible deniability. Daniel could sit back later and say, "Well, I told her what to do," while watching her flounder in rules he helped write, and then quietly abandoned. And when someone creates the chaos and then acts shocked by the mess, that's not love. It's a setup. She walks in with shoulders stiff and nerves loud, stepping into a room charged with quiet expectation. But no one tells her where to look, when to bow, or how to breathe. The moment is meant to feel reverent, but to Lisa it feels like entering a courtroom without knowing the charges. Daniel walks beside her, silent, confident, not kneeling as he said they both would, not guiding her gently, but letting her hesitate, then move forward out of sync. He takes the wine she was told to pass and holds it himself. And already, without a word spoken, she's failed the test she was never properly taught. Every eye in the room watches her not quite belong. She's told to sit. The uncle begins. No time to settle. No softness in tone. He asks her to speak about herself, and she starts from the only safe place she knows. Her childhood, her adoption, her work. She speaks like someone trying to prove worth, not share a story. Then she says it, that she takes care of her household, that she helps Daniel take care of his. It sounds noble, responsible, generous, but it's not true. Not in full. And she knows it the second it leaves her mouth. Because she's in debt. Because she's borrowed money from friends to keep Daniel afloat. Because she's already stretched herself past comfort and called it love. The words aren't malicious, but they are curated. They're the kind of lie told by someone trying not to look small. A lie that comes from shame, not from strategy. But still, it's a lie. And once it starts, more follow. Faith comes next. Yes, she's a practicing Christian, she says. Not always a good one, but still practicing. She tells the uncle she used to smoke, but doesn't anymore. Technically true, but she vapes, and everyone in that room knows what that means. The semantics are thin, the intentions don't matter. She's shaping a version of herself she hopes will pass inspection, and she sees it. In the uncle's eyes, in Daniel's posture, in her own breath, she's already in the red. The story she's trying to sell is cracking under pressure. And once a lie escapes under pressure, it never walks out alone. It invites more to follow. And each one asks the same question. How much of this woman is real? The room didn't get louder, but it got heavier. The kind of heavy that makes your breath feel like it takes up too much space. Lisa sat, trying to hold herself upright, still wearing the formal outfit that no longer felt ceremonial. Just suffocating. The uncle's questions had been circling like a hawk. First her habits, then her faith, now her past. And with each one, The space between her and Daniel widened, even though he sat right next to her. When the question about her sexuality came, again, it didn't sound like curiosity. It landed like an accusation wrapped in tradition. This time, there was no buffer, no buildup, no softening. The uncle looked her straight in the eye and asked the thing Daniel had never warned her was coming. It didn't matter how many times she said she loved Daniel or wanted to build a future with him. None of that was visible anymore. All anyone in that room wanted to know now was what kind of past she had, and whether it made her unworthy of their approval. Her mouth opened, then closed again. This wasn't confusion. It was panic. She looked at Daniel like maybe he'd step in, maybe he'd soften the moment, explain to his uncle that this wasn't the way. But Daniel stayed silent. Not out of respect, out of calculation. The truth is, he had already told his uncle. He had thrown her under the bus in private, and now let her figure out how to survive it in public. Lisa was on her own. She said it was one time. She said it was in the past. She said it didn't define her. But her voice betrayed her. It shook, and when it shook, it wasn't because she was ashamed of her truth. It was because she could feel how much this room wanted her to be. Then the uncle told Daniel to monitor her. Monitor, like she was a risk. Like she was a child with a record. Like her identity was a virus he could catch if he didn't keep her under supervision. Daniel nodded, and Lisa sat there, stunned. Not because she didn't expect judgment, but because the man she thought would protect her had silently agreed to the terms of her surveillance. And the worst part isn't that she was humiliated, it's that someone else arranged the humiliation and acted like it just happened. She sits there, smiling through tears, nodding as if she's still present, but her mind is already collapsing inward, replaying every choice that led her here. Not just the last week, not even the last year, but the last 21 years. Each moment like a hidden weight stitched into the lining of her skin. She's still married. She never told Daniel. She never even told herself, not fully, how much she was still dragging behind her, hoping if she loved hard enough or bent far enough, she could start clean without ever going back. But there's no starting clean when you've never wiped the surface. And now, surrounded by judgment dressed up as ceremony, Lisa feels the shame not just of being judged, but of knowing she handed them the rope. The lie about the marriage wasn't a strategy. It was a delay. She thought she'd tell him after the blessing, after the trip, after things settled. But things never settle when they're built on silence. And the sexuality question? God, that one has clawed at her for decades. She didn't lie because she was ashamed of her past. She lied because she was afraid of what this present would do with it. She loved women. For most of her life, women were her comfort, her safety, her truth. And now she's here, telling a man she barely knows the version of herself he can tolerate, hoping he doesn't notice how many pieces are missing. She agreed to marry Daniel knowing he didn't know her. Not really. She told herself it was love, or fate, or timing. But under all that softness, there was panic. Because being alone scared her more than being dishonest. And maybe that's the truth she's never said out loud, that the lie didn't start with Daniel. It started with the voice in her head that said she wouldn't be chosen if she told the full story. And now, every moment she spends in his presence feels like walking a tightrope made of her own denial. Because Daniel didn't trick her into this. She stepped in willingly, with secrets behind her back, and a smile she hoped would be enough to distract him. And when your biggest fear is being left for telling the truth, sometimes the lie starts to feel like the only way to be loved at all. She waits until the ceremony is over, until the uncle leaves, until the silence stretches long enough to feel like safety, then finally asks the question she's been swallowing since the moment her entire body went cold at that table. Why didn't you tell me you told him? Her voice isn't loud, but it doesn't need to be. Every word lands sharp because it comes from the place inside her where trust used to live. Daniel barely flinches. He shrugs, says it wasn't her place to say anything, that it was his right, that his uncle needed to know because he's like a father. And just like that, the floor drops again. Lisa stares at him. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. He told her to be honest while he was moving behind her back. He left her unprepared, embarrassed, exposed, then acted like it was a cultural duty. But what kind of tradition demands silence from one partner and confession from the other? What kind of man lets a woman walk into judgment without a warning? She pushes back, asks him why he didn't warn her, why he didn't think she deserved a chance to prepare. And instead of answering, he doubles down. I don't owe you that, he says. The uncle needed to know. I didn't think you'd handle it right. The words don't just hurt, they rearrange the entire shape of the relationship. Because what he's saying isn't about information, it's about power. It's about who gets to decide what matters, who gets to control the story, who gets to speak first and leave the other scrambling to catch up. Lisa realizes she was never being brought into his world. She was being managed inside it. She was a project, a performance, not a partner. And when she says this isn't fair, that it's her life too, he tells her flatly, you don't understand my culture. You don't get to decide. And with that sentence, the dynamic locks into place. Daniel has written the rules, and he's also the one who gets to say when they apply. He hides behind the idea of tradition to excuse betrayal. He uses respect as a shield for control. And every time Lisa tries to level the playing field, he pulls it out from under her and calls it her fault for not being balanced enough. And the moment you realize someone's version of love only works if you stay silent, you stop asking for answers, you start calculating your exit. He doesn't hesitate. The uncle stands, lifts his hands, and speaks words that sound ceremonial, but they land more like a contract being signed. He says he's granting the blessing, says he'll pray for their union, says Daniel has chosen well. But everything about the moment feels hollow. Lisa doesn't smile with relief. She exhales like someone who's barely passed a test they didn't know they were taking. The words sound like victory, but in her chest, it doesn't feel like one. It feels like she's just been cleared for duty. Not loved, not embraced, not forgiven, approved. And only because she gave the right answers fast enough to keep the deal moving. She hears it in how the uncle talks to Daniel, not her. Sees it in how Daniel receives a blessing like a promotion, not a moment of shared joy. This wasn't about whether Lisa was good for Daniel emotionally. It was about whether she was useful to him structurally. And she was. She had said what needed to be said. Lied when she had to. Lowered herself when expected. Withstood insult without argument. She played the role. And now, the exchange is complete. The family gets access, Daniel gets elevation, and Lisa gets... what? Exactly? Her face says everything. The weight isn't lifting. The shame isn't gone. The blessing didn't bring peace. It brought clarity. She can finally see what this all was. A transaction. One where her past was inspected like baggage, her body dressed for presentation, and her story tailored to fit expectations she didn't create. And Daniel, the man who was supposed to want her for who she is, never actually asked who she was. He asked what she could do, what she could give, what she could endure. He never defended her in that room, never stopped the uncle when the questions got cruel, never told the full truth himself. But still, he walks out as the man who passed the test. Because for him, the criteria was always different. He didn't need to be pure. He didn't need to confess. He just needed to be calm, traditional, and male. Lisa watches him thank his uncle like it's a job well done. And it is. For him. For her, It's a confirmation that love was never the thing on trial. Usefulness was. And when Daniel later looks at her like they've achieved something, like they're stronger now, she nods back. But inside, something closes. Not out of hate, out of understanding. She's not confused anymore. She knows exactly what she is in this setup. Not a partner, not a bride, an investment. And when someone accepts you, not because of who you are, but because of what you're worth, you stop wondering if you're loved and start calculating how long you can survive being needed. She wipes her face, not because the tears are gone, but because they've become inconvenient. She says she wants to be honest, says she needs to come clean, but the words don't come out clean at all. They come out filtered, edited, softened for impact. She says she's been with a woman before. Says it like a confession. Says it like it was once. Quick. Unimportant. But the truth, the actual truth, is longer, deeper, more complicated. 21 years. Not one night. Not one fling. 2 decades of her life, erased in one sentence. And she knows it. And yet, she still says it that way. Because full truth isn't safe here. Full truth would collapse what little control she still has. And Daniel sits there, listening, nodding, playing the role of someone who is gracious and mature, but not asking questions, not seeking to understand. Because he doesn't want more truth. He wants confirmation that the story is now fixed, that it won't shift again under his feet. He wants her contained, not understood. He wants her story to stop evolving, to stay in the version that makes him look like the forgiving one. He says he accepts her, says he's okay with her past, but you can feel it in the way his eyes harden at certain words, the way his body shifts when the details come close to disrupting his script. Lisa senses it. And that's why she doesn't tell him she's still legally married, that her divorce isn't finalized, that the paperwork is undone, that if he tried to file right now, they'd hit a wall, that the relationship they just received a blessing for is technically not even legal. She tells herself it's temporary, that she'll tell him later. But that's how it always starts, with a later that turns into a never. She's sitting next to a man she calls her future, while lying about her present and hiding her past, and somehow convincing herself that she's being honest. But she's not. Not really. She's giving the version of herself she thinks he'll tolerate. And every time she does, she loses a little more of the version of herself that's real. Daniel, meanwhile, doesn't press. Not because he trusts her, but because he's satisfied with the performance. Her guilt flatters him. Her crying confirms his authority. He doesn't need the full truth. He needs the hierarchy to stay intact. He needs her to feel indebted, confused, unsure, because as long as she's apologizing, she won't be asking questions of her own. And when both people are pretending, but only one of them is punished for it, what you're watching isn't a love story. It's an emotional economy built on fear, silence, and debt. Daniel clasps his uncle's hand with practiced warmth, smiles wide, shoulders straight, thanking him for the blessing like a man who's just secured his future. Not with love, but with precision. It's a moment that plays well on camera, tight family bond, cultural ritual honored, the bride humbling herself for approval. But behind that smile is a man who knows the real negotiation already happened, and Lisa was never part of it. He walks out of that room with everything he wanted. Respect. Legitimacy. A quiet promise of entry into a better life. And Lisa trails behind him, nodding, smiling, performing her gratitude like it means something. But inside, she knows. She didn't pass the test because she proved herself. She passed because she folded fast enough to be useful. She watches him shake hands, hug, thank elders, while her chest tightens with every fake congratulation. The lies didn't die in that room. They're still breathing, still waiting. And she knows it. She knows the marriage license hasn't been filed, knows the divorce papers from her previous marriage aren't processed, knows Daniel's understanding of her sexuality is based on a carefully trimmed version of the truth, knows the family's approval wasn't earned, it was bought with silence. But now, the real fear isn't about being exposed. It's about what happens when she's no longer needed. Because once the blessing is old news, once the visa process begins, once Daniel doesn't have to pretend anymore, what happens to a woman who has nothing left to offer but loyalty? She walks beside him, but she's not beside him. She's trailing a few steps behind, mentally already packing contingencies. She won't say it out loud. Not yet, but she knows something is coming, because a relationship built on omission doesn't collapse with one explosion. It decays slowly, conversation by conversation, until there's nothing left but cold politeness and delayed paperwork. And Daniel, for all his charm, doesn't seem like the type who forgives twice. He barely forgives once. She tells herself maybe she can make it right. Maybe she'll confess next week. Maybe when things are calmer, but she said that before. And every time she delays, the distance between them grows. It's no longer about the truth. It's about the clock. And she can feel it ticking. Because when the real collapse comes, and it won't be loud. It'll be quiet, legal, unemotional, efficient. And it won't matter how much she cried or how hard she tried. The only thing that will matter is who had more leverage when it counted. And if love was never the foundation, only the cover, then the moment someone stops needing you, the entire house falls. And the only question left is whether anyone will admit they built it on lies.